Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are doing a deep dive into someone whose inventions, well, they're literally all around you in your music, on your screen, yet you probably never heard his name. We're talking about Alan Dower Blumlein, a British electronic engineer, a real polymath who managed to get, 128 patents.
That's right, 128, covering everything from telecommunications, TV, radar, and crucially for us today, spatial audio. And just to give that number some context, 128 patents. That works out to a fundamental new invention every, maybe, 4 months of his working life, which was tragically short.
Wow.
He wasn't just prolific, he was truly foundational. I mean, the sources we're looking at today, they make a really strong case. They call him the father of spatial audio. His invention of stereophonic sound back in 1931 really laid all the groundwork for the immersive 3D sound we just, take for granted now.
Right, and that's really our mission here today, to figure out why this absolute giant whose work basically shaped 20th century tech is so often overlooked. A hidden giant, really.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating, I think, is how his genius wasn't confined to one little box. He wasn't just an audio guy or just a TV guy. He was solving fundamental problems across acoustics, electromagnetism, optical systems, and often connecting these fields in ways nobody else saw. Using this elegant mathematical intuition, he saw the links.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. Born 1903, Hampstead, London. His father was a German Jewish engineer, his mother Scottish. Seems like engineering was in the blood.
Oh, absolutely. And there's this brilliant anecdote that really captures his, let's say, innate spirit. When he was only 7 years old, seven, he fixes the family doorbell. But he doesn't just fix it, he draws up a proper invoice for his father, charges him 6 pence for the service.
Oh, way.
Yes, and signs it Ingeniero Electrico.
I love that. Ingeniero Electrico. At 7. Shows a certain confidence, doesn't it? And that clearly carried through. He went to Imperial College, got a first-class degree in just 2 years.
Exactly. Super bright academically, obviously. But the sources stress he wasn't just about book smarts. He was deeply intuitive, non-linear in his thinking. There's that famous line where he joked he never found quadratic equations hard because, well, he didn't know he was supposed to find them hard.
He just saw the solution.
Pretty much. His core skill, it seems, was breaking down incredibly complex problems into, simple, manageable steps. Algorithmically, almost. Even his early work in the 20s on high-frequency stuff was winning awards.
So, a mind that naturally structures things.
Yeah.
Okay, before we dive into stereo sound, which is maybe his most famous contribution, we need to talk about television. He was huge there too, right?
Yeah.
Especially for the BBC.
Pivotal is the word. At EMI, working under Isaac Schoenberg, he wasn't just inventing, he was finding clever ways around existing patents, things held by big players like Bell. He had to develop new cutting heads for recording sound onto discs, for example, just to avoid patent infringement. And often, his solutions were actually better.
And the TV work. That wasn't just tweaking things either. He solved some fundamental problems. The first BBC broadcast from Alexandra Palace, the 405 line system, his fingerprints are all over that.
Oh, definitely. He developed the resonant scan system. That's basically how the picture got drawn onto the old cathode ray tubes efficiently. But maybe even more critical was his invention for voltage regulation and something called clamping of black level.
Okay, clamping of black level. What does that actually mean for someone watching at home back then?
Right, well, think about it. For a stable TV picture, one that doesn't flicker or fade in and out, the TV set needs a constant, reliable reference point for what black is. Without Blumlein's clamp circuit, the picture brightness and contrast would just drift all over the place depending on the signal. He gave it an anchor. He essentially defined the shape of the waveform that became the standard.
That's fascinating, how his mind could work on, the absolute silence of black level and the complexity of sound. And he even combined light and sound on film.
Yes, another area. Early 30s, he developed a 2-track optical sound system on 35mm film. Kind of a precursor to later optical sound techniques.
How did that work visually on the film itself?
It was, again, this beautiful blend of simple math and simple mechanics. He figured out how to code the left and right audio information mathematically using light modulation directly onto the film strip. So instead of just one wiggly line for the sound, he had 2 interacting tracks, one representing the sum of the channels, L plus R, and the other representing the difference, LR.
And he did this without complex computers.
Exactly. Just basic lenses, light sensors. It shows that complexity doesn't always need complicated hardware, just a really smart way of encoding the information.
Okay, now we get to the really juicy part. The reason many sources call him the father of spatial audio, his 1931 stereo patent. And the story goes it was born out of sheer annoyance.
That's the story, yes. He was watching an early talkie, a film with sound, and he noticed the sound was just blasting from one speaker, probably center screen, but the actor on screen moving left and right.
Ah, so the sound didn't follow the picture.
Precisely. That disconnect, that lack of realism, apparently really bothered him. It drove him to invent a way to capture and reproduce the direction of sound.
So he wanted what he called binaural sound, not just louder or quieter, but sound with placement. Almost like you said, 2D ambisonics. But he didn't just, stick two mics up.
No, much more elegant. His approach was mathematically rigorous, but mechanically quite straightforward. To capture the sound field horizontally, he used a pair of figure-8 microphones.
Figure 8? They pick up front and back, but reject the sides.
Exactly, and he mounted them very specifically at right angles to each other, 90 degrees. This setup captured the sound not just as volume, but as vectors, based on how the sound waves hit those two perpendicular mics.
Right, so he's got these two signals coming from the mics representing the sound field. But the killer question is, how did he get all that spatial information onto a single groove of a vinyl record? That seems impossible.
Ah, well, that is the genius. The sum and difference technique again, but applied mechanically. He didn't try to cut two separate grooves. He used the single groove in two different ways simultaneously.
Okay, break that down. Two different ways.
Yeah. One way was the traditional lateral movement, the stylus wiggling side to side in the groove, like a standard mono record. He used that lateral motion to encode the sum signal, L plus R.
Okay, L plus R side to side. What about the other direction?
Vertical movement, the stylus moving up and down in the groove. That dimension, which mono players largely ignored, he used to encode the different signal, L minus R.
So the groove itself is doing this complex little dance, moving side to side and up and down at the same time. And that combined motion contains the code for left and right.
Exactly that. It's just brilliant information density, pure vector coding onto a physical medium. And the beauty was, if you played the stereo record on an old mono player,
What happened?
the mono player's stylus would respond mainly to the lateral side-to-side movement, which was the L plus R signal. So it would just play a perfectly acceptable mono version. Instant backwards comparability. Genius.
That is incredibly clever. Okay, so the record's cut. How did the playback system, the listener's record player, decode that wiggly groove back into separate left and right sounds for the speakers? Must need complex electronics, right?
Surprisingly, no. That's another stroke of elegance. The decoding was done using simple passive components, mostly transformers, arranged in what he called a shuffling circuit, usually within the amplifier or speaker system.
A shuffling circuit, like a decoder ring.
Pretty much. It knew the lateral signal was L plus R and the vertical was LR. So the simple circuit just did the necessary additions and subtractions. It mathematically recombined those two signals to pull out the original separate L and R channel.
Wow. Simple hardware, complex result. Maintaining the directionality.
Exactly. Simple math, elegantly applied.
And this wasn't just a patent drawing. They actually did this.
Oh yes. This was the world's first functional stereophonic system. They cut test discs as early as 1933. And there was a famous recording session in 1935 at Abbey Road Studios' Mozart's Jupiter Symphony, captured in true stereo.
Amazing. Abbey Road, 1935.
And think about the bigger picture here, this whole idea, this vector coding. You can see how it's the seed for everything that came later in 3D audio. Mathematically, you could extend that L plus R, LR logic, add height information, maybe using more microphones. You'd get coordinates in 3D space, W, X, Y, Z. The sources point out that his fundamental approach is the direct intellectual ancestor of things like ambisonics, object-based audio, even head-related transfer functions for binaural 3D sound. Techniques developed decades later. He basically sketched out the core ideas for Dolby Atmos 80 years early.
80 years. It's just staggering. A pioneer in every sense. But his story takes a very sudden tragic turn with World War II.
Tragically, yes. When the war broke out, his unique skills were immediately flagged as vital for the war effort. He moved from EMI to the top-secret Telecommunications Research Establishment, TRE, his main project there, developing the H-2S airborne radar.
Right, the radar that let Allied bombers see the ground at night and through clouds. Hugely important.
Absolutely critical. Blumlein pushed the technology into using much shorter wavelengths, centimetric waves, around 10 centimeters. He developed specialized antennas for it. This gave much higher resolution, allowing pilots to actually map terrain features from the air. Winston Churchill himself knew Blumlein's value. He apparently considered him a strategic high-value asset. His work on H-2S was seen as actively shortening the war. by months, potentially.
But being that valuable, tragically, put him in harm's way.
It did. Alan Blumlein died on June 7, 1942. He was only 38 years old. He was on a test flight for the H-2S radar system. The plane, a Handley Page Halifax bomber, crashed. It wasn't enemy action, it was a mechanical failure. Investigations found a loose engine mounting nut hadn't been tightened properly, leading to an engine fire and the crash. A terrible, mundane accident with huge consequences.
Just awful. And because his work was so secret and so vital, his death itself became a secret.
Yes. Churchill personally ordered that Blumlein's death be kept quiet for 3 years, the sources say.
3 years. Why?
Because losing the lead brain behind the H-2S radar was seen as a major strategic blow. If Hitler and the Axis powers found out that Britain had lost this key innovator, it could have been a huge morale boost for them and potentially damaging to Allied intelligence security. He became, in effect, a hidden martyr, his death concealed for the sake of the war effort.
What an incredible story. And what a sacrifice, buried in secrecy. So to sum him up, a brilliant mind, pioneer in optics, acoustics, television, a key figure in the war effort, and ultimately a hidden martyr. And his core approach, this elegant mathematical simplification, really did accelerate progress across multiple fields.
It really did. And it's fitting, though very late, that he received a posthumous Technical Grammy Award in 2017. Recognition at last. And today, that core logic he used, L plus R, LR, it's not just history. It's the direct foundation for advanced techniques like higher order ambisonics, the stuff used in VR, AR, modern cinema sound. It all traces back to Blumlein's thinking.
So let's bring it back to you listening now. What does this all mean? Well, the sources throw up a fascinating what if. Could Blumlein have actually developed true 3D audio, maybe 100 years ago? If his 2D vector coding idea had been combined with other simple tech that existed back then, like maybe Faraday's coils or Bell's telephone principles, was 3D sound sitting there waiting to be assembled?
His story is a powerful reminder, isn't it? That sometimes the biggest breakthroughs aren't about discovering some brand new law of nature. Sometimes it's about having the insight, the mathematical intuition perhaps, to connect two existing, maybe even simple ideas in a completely novel way.
So thinking about that counterfactual history, what stunning innovations might we be missing today, simply because the right mind hasn't yet connected 2 or 3 existing, maybe even obvious pieces of technology or mathematical frameworks that are just sitting there waiting to be combined? Something to think about. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Thank you.